Hey, open your Bible to Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2. As you're opening your Bible, let me welcome those of you down in the Student Center. Take good care of my family down there, would you? Let me welcome those of you over in Henry Chapel as well, those of you streaming, those of you at Starbucks and McDonald's. We appreciate you being a part. Wherever you are, we're glad you're with us this morning, especially today. That song that we sang about stronger. You believe that? You believe God's stronger than anything that comes against you? You believe He's stronger than anything that faces you? You got to believe that. Because if He isn't, I don't know what we're doing here. But I'm here because I believe God's stronger. And why would we talk about marriage for these weeks? Because I believe God's stronger. Your marriage can be better. God can take two really messed up people and He can make something beautiful out of it. I'm convinced of that. And I pray for that for every one of us. By the way, I learned a secret this week. It's from someone who is long gone. Agatha Christie said, the way that you can ensure, ladies, that your husband stays connected, marry an archaeologist. And the older you get, the more interested he is in you. So there you go. That ought to help. And speaking of that, did you realize 165 Americans marry every day over the age of 65? 8 of them, that's their first time. I think it's cool. 8 of them, that's the first time. It's never too late. Don't give up. Don't be discouraged. Hey, you're a long way from 65. You got a long way to go. Like one woman on a cruise. Most of them meet on a cruise, by the way. Did you know that? One woman on a cruise looked at this guy and said, "Oh, my goodness, you look like my third husband." And he goes, "My goodness, ma'am, how many times have you been married?" She said, "Twice." That's how it happens. So if you ask our children, what do they think about marriage, you're going to get some crazy answers. Watch this from our children.
What do you know about marriage?
Nothing.
Nothing at all?
Yes.
But what is it? Do you know what it is?
No.
I think it's something about being kind.
Something that you go to so you can have time with your husband and wife.
How do they know they like each other?
Because it's not about the outside, but it's the inside. And some of them can see the inside of your heart.
But why do people do it? Why do people get married?
So they can get more money.
Get more money? How do they get more money by getting married?
So they can live more.
Okay. Are you ever going to get married?
Yes. I'll have to see when I get older.
You're not sure yet?
No, you're right. I'm not sure.
You want to get married someday?
No.
You're just going to be a bachelor?
Yes.
You know what that is?
No.
Who do you want to marry?
My Aunt Caroline.
Oh, really? Is she married?
Not yet. I think I have to ask her.
I want to marry my mom, but my mom's already married.
Do you want to get married someday?
Yeah.
My mom said that I'm not allowed to give anyone until I'm past college.
Interviewing kids is tough. It's hard on your knees. We got to find some taller kids. This kid's too short. Don't get this kid. How old should you be when you get married?
37, maybe. 90.
90 years old?
10.
10 years old.
Yeah.
20?
Maybe.
30?
That's gonna be too old.
That's too old to get married. How do you know your mom and dad love each other?
Because they just love each other.
Do they ever fight?
No.
Never?
Sometimes. At the end, they come and agree and say, well, I guess your point's okay and my point's okay, and they try to make up.
What do you think makes a marriage last?
Well, I think the bonds between the man and the woman, and also the bonds between them and God.
If you try to get a divorce, your soul doesn't get a divorce.
So what would be your advice to people who are married? what would you want to tell them?
Don't break up.
Try to let one person do what they want first, and then you can do what you want, others before yourself.
That's pretty good. Give it up for the kids. They got, I love it. Did I hear it right? He's going to marry his aunt? He must be from Arkansas. I didn't realize that we didn't have anybody from Arkansas there. Hey, I want you to do something. We're not going through all the scriptures that are on your, in your listening guide. My plan is stay right here in Genesis, okay? And we're going to come back. Next weekend, you don't want to miss, it's on parenting, okay? And there's some reasons we're going to interrupt the marriage to talk about parenting, but it's critical that you hear what we're going to talk about when it comes to parenting. But the week after that, we're going back and we're going to finish talking about marriage, because here's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about God's purpose for marriage. Why marriage in the first place? What's his purpose for your marriage? And then what happened? What's the problem? Because we hear so many bad things and so many marriages fail and all of that. What happened? And then what's the hope for my marriage, for your marriage? And it's all right here in Genesis. And it starts with his purpose. What did he have in mind? What was he planning or thinking when God created marriage? And so what I want you to do is I want you to go back to Genesis chapter 2. We're going to start kind of the foundation. Remember, the foundation is what's critical to the wall. And that foundation is the secret of whether or not there are cracks in the wall. And it's all about a foundation. So we decided we're going to start in Genesis. We're going to look at what he had in mind from the beginning. And we believe that represents a foundation. That is, let's build it on him. Let's build it on his truth. Last week we learned that he made us male and female. There are differences. And good thing. It's a great relationship when you're able to understand your mate is God's gift for you. Suitable helper is what he called woman. And he gave her to Adam. Adam says, at last, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, she shall be called woman, Isha, because she was taken out of man, Ish. So men, we are Ish in Hebrew. Woman is Isha, meaning she came from us. And so I described what a suitable helper was. It's two complementary parts that together, it's not that they make a whole, it's that they accomplish something. Be careful with making, he completes me, she completes me. No human on the planet can complete you. The only one who can complete you is a relationship with Jesus Christ. So don't look to your wife to make you happy or completely, or to your husband. They will not. They will fail you. And they will not make you complete, because there's only one who can do that, and that's Christ. However, we can work together. And so I said the best analogy I knew was a sprocket and a chain on a bicycle. And it's cool how they work together, because if everything's working the way it should, man, you go somewhere, your marriage goes somewhere. It's really, really fun. The chain cannot do it without the sprocket. The sprocket cannot do it without the chain. You need your spouse. You were meant for one another. And let's just draw a circle around your marriage right now. If you've been married 2 or 3 times, don't go back. Well, I think that was my sprocket was back in the first marriage. No. Let's draw a circle around where you are, and let's believe God that he can take the one you're married to right now, and he can make this thing work, because he had a purpose. And the purpose is found in verse 24. This is the most often quoted verse in the Bible on marriage. When I say often quoted, I don't mean by us. I mean by the Bible itself. This verse occurs 3 more times after it is mentioned in Genesis. It's the one Paul went to. When he wanted to describe marriage, he chose this verse. I'm going to make it real simple. Let me tell you what I think the purpose of marriage is, and then we'll kind of work our way through. Number 1, relationship. I think the reason God created a thing called marriage is because we're built for relationship, and a marriage is a part of that relationship and a relational aspect of who we are. Number 2, image bearing. I believe that God gave us marriage to help us glorify God. I believe that marriage is a picture of our relationship with God. In fact, next time we talk about marriage, I believe, and Tim Keller agrees, the book, The Meaning of Marriage, is a great book by Tim Keller. He also agrees that God, when he created marriage, it was to get us ready for Christ. Because the same relationship we have with one another in a marriage, you're going to see pictured in a relationship with Jesus. There's this beautiful comparison that the Bible does. And I think that marriage is, we are to glorify God together. We're image bearers. And the last thing is procreation, to have children, to multiply. I mean, obviously, Adam and Eve to multiply. So those are the three purposes. And I've got them kind of in that order for a reason, because I think the most important one is relationship. Look at verse 24. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Verse 25, and the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Now, in that verse 24, that is the most often quoted verse. 25 doesn't get quoted again. It's verse 24. For this cause, or therefore, shall a man leave his mother and father. Notice the relational aspect of marriage is compared to the relationship you have with your mother and father. And you know what's interesting about that? There was no such thing as a mother and father when he wrote this. They didn't have children yet. So he is actually saying, you're going to understand this better. When you have children, you're going to understand that in the same way you're in relationship with your children and your children with you, that is what is supposed to be about marriage, relationship. So what happens is you leave mother and father and you cleave to your wife or to your husband. Now let's talk about leaving. It doesn't mean replacing. It doesn't mean dishonoring. It doesn't mean you absolve yourself from any responsibility of taking care of your parents. Absolutely not. It means now you have been prepared for a relationship that is even more intimate and is closer to your relationship with God than even your relationship to your parents, and that is to your wife or to your husband. It is the second greatest relationship on the planet. Number one is that to Jesus. Number two is your relationship to your husband or your wife. And so the relational aspect comes out clearly when he talks about that. He says, you're made for that, so leave. Now, leave is a strong Hebrew word. Let me tell you where else it occurs. Whenever Ruth and Naomi was the mother-in-law, remember, and she'd lost her husband, and then she lost her sons. That meant Ruth, her daughter-in-law, was a widow also. And Ruth begged Naomi not to leave her. Leave her, meaning, I need you, I'm dependent on you. So now we're to leave mother and father, meaning I've taken my dependency or my need, and now I have given it to this man or this woman in my life called my spouse, called my husband or wife. I know a lot of couples that never leave. Rachel and I, when we married, she had grown up in El Dorado, Arkansas. Her father was a physician there for 50 years. Her grandfather was a physician there. Her great-grandfather was a physician there. They got the land from the Indians in the 1800s. Forever, that was home. That roots are deep in South Arkansas. I come along. She's the first one to marry out of her family. And then I move her, pulling everything we own in a U-Haul behind a Grand Torino. And we go to Fort Worth, Texas. We're 6 hours from any blood kin. And it was the greatest thing we could have done. Because guess what? We had to have each other. We didn't have family. We didn't have people around us. We had each other. And we learned more about each other in those 10 years. Now, did we still love family? Absolutely. Did we love to see them come and visit? Man, we longed for that. But it forced us to love one another. It forced us to lean into one another. It forced us to leave mother and father and really to understand what that meant to cleave. I think if you take a poll among the couples here in the room, I do it every time I teach on marriage and with couples. I always ask, what are the top 5 problems in your marriage? Did you know almost every time in the top 3 will be problems with in-laws? In-laws. You remember the questions you guys turned in last week? Some great questions, by the way. One of them was about what should we do with our adult children who are experiencing problems in their marriage? When I read that question, as soon as I read it, I said, nothing. But then I thought, no. You pray for them. Don't get in the way of what it means to leave mother and father and to cleave. I used to think that, after you've been married a while, that goes away. It did. We never had any problem with in-laws. We lived 6 hours from them, but one day, I actually was their pastor. I was my in-laws' pastor. And it was awesome. It was wonderful. But it's not always that way. I had a couple, they were 72 years old. They called and said, we need to talk to you about our marriage. I'm like, you're 72 years old. What could be wrong in your, I'm just thinking, And they come in, you know what the problem was? His mother. My first thought was, she's still living? Your mom is still living? Yes. Well, what's the problem? And the wife said she spends more time with her, takes better care of her, and I'm neglected. 72 years of age. And they're still struggling with what it means to leave mother and father and to cleave. So it means that the marriage that you have is the most important relationship on the planet. You say, but I was their son or daughter long before I was married to him. This is not about time. You're not a sea turtle. It's not about longevity. It's about what is the order God has established for the home and for marriage. And what's the proper order in terms of importance of relationship. And again, it doesn't mean replace or you walk away from family. It just means you build a new one. And it's a great one. And you transfer that love and you do in that what you were trained to do, hopefully, with your mom and dad. And so you cling. And by the way, could I just throw this in? It also means you leave your high school and college friends. I cannot tell you how many times the issue has been the college buddies, the college girlfriends. And they never had any time together because there was always something going on with the guys, something going on with the girls. You leave your other relationships and you have one primary relationship, and that is the one you're married to, your husband or your wife. Now, that's leaving. Cleaving. What does it mean to cleave to your wife? It's a beautiful word. It's a Hebrew word. The best way I know how to describe it is another place that it's used in the Bible. It's used in 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 10. David is fighting Philistines with his mighty men all day long, and there is a reference to this word. It actually is used, same Hebrew word. It says that David fought all day and would not let go of his sword. Would not let go of his sword. The word to cleave is that word. It means you don't let go of something. Now listen to it. Leave mother and father. Cleave. And don't dare let go. Don't let go. Yeah, but Pastor, you don't understand how bad things. Don't let go. David was tired. David had fought Philistines all day. David was worn out. But the Bible says David would not let go, and it chose to use that word. That's what it means to fight for your marriage. You don't fight your marriage, you fight for your marriage. You hold on to it, and you don't let go. Oh, every once in a while, I just see a couple, and they're letting go, and I want to say to them, you just don't know what's around the corner. You have no idea. God could change everything tomorrow. God could change you tomorrow. He could change her tomorrow or him. And don't let go before you see victory. David held on to the sword all day long. And then you will be one with her. Let me tell you what I think that holding on looks like. I think it's companionship. I think it means you love being together. It's hard to let go of somebody you love. Now, Rachel, we've had our discussions, and it's so cool because we're very, very honest about marriage. And the other day, we were driving back from the beach and on Memorial Day, and we were talking about what are the three most important words. And Joshua was in the car with us. We were coming up with 3 words that should be in every marriage. And you know what was the common word we agreed upon easily? Forgiveness. You see, to hold on to your marriage doesn't mean you want it the way it is. It means you want it the way God can make it. And you're holding on for that. Are there times it's a fight? Oh, yeah. But that's forgiveness. It's just hard to let go of somebody that you love. I mean, I've told Rachel, in our worst struggles along the way, I said, hey, you leave me, I'm going with you. I mean, that's just the way it is. I'm holding on. I am wherever you are. And I meant it, and I believe it. So let me talk to you about companionship. Do you know what's the most important need of a guy? I know girls in the room and ladies down in the student center in Henry Chapel, you're thinking, no, it's sex for my husband. No, it isn't. His greatest need is companionship. He wants you to be with him. He can get sex from anybody. Well, he's not supposed to, but he can. But he can. You know what he can't get from everybody and everybody is companionship with somebody who truly loves him. I can remember asking Rachel when we first married to go to every basketball game. I was still playing a lot of leagues, and I just said, can you be at the game? She said, I got other things. Can you just be there? She said, why? I mean, there's just a few people that show up. I said, yeah, but that kind of hurt me. But yes, can you just be there? And she was there. I'd go out and work on the car. I'd change the oil. I mean, we were broke. I didn't have money to get it fixed. I was working on it. Hey, can you come out there and just be there? She said, I don't know anything about cars. I said, I know, but I'd just like you to be there. Let me tell you, one of the coolest things about marriage is being there with one another. I'm not talking about dating with several couples, okay? Let me just make sure you understand. I mean just the two of you. Dr. Dobson was one of my favorites when he did his radio show. He would have call-ins, and this lady called in. She said her husband did the same thing, made her sit in a lawn chair while he worked on the car so they could just be together and talk. And one day she had gone to the grocery store, couldn't be with him as he's working on the car. She comes back, and all she can see is the lower part of his body sticking out from under the car. So she just walks over, and she unzips his pants and then zips them back up. And she hears a noise under the car, and she's like, boy, that must have scared him. She goes in the door, and there's her husband in the kitchen. They go outside to see the neighbor. He is knocked out. When she unzipped his pants, he raised up and hit his head underneath the car. He's out. They call an ambulance. True story. So when you're with one another, I mean, yeah, have fun. One lady called in and said her husband wanted to do something really funny one day because they had fun together. So he's taking a shower, and he's right in the middle of his shower, and he's got soap all over him, and he just gets the urge to go run and give her a kiss, which is normally okay. He gets out of the shower, goes down the hall. She's sitting at the kitchen table. He's locked in on her, and the look on her face told him something is not right here. And about the time he got to her, he looked to the right, and there was her friend who had come over to visit. I just love stories like that because at least there's couples out there knowing how to play together. They like being together. You know, I love the outdoors, and I love fishing, and Rachel has really gotten into fishing. She loves it. We never keep any. We just catch and release because we just love being out. And the other day, I don't remember, I think I had one on the line, and I was going to hand the pole to her, and she said, no, that's all right. I'm good. She had laid her pole down, was just sitting there, and I said, well, come on, you like to fish? She said, I do, but that's not why I come out here. I said, why'd you come? I just like being with you. I'm going to tell you, it got me. It still does every time I think about it. So my question is, do you like being with one another? Because that was one of the reasons God brought you together, is companionship. You're made for each other. Life goes a lot better when you're with each other, not with a bunch of others. I understand that there are times where you want to go out with other couples. That's great. But I know couples that never go out together. They always go out with the tribe. You don't need a herd. You need the two of you. I read about a couple that called. They never knew how to do anything together, so they called another couple friend. They said, hey, y'all want to go out tonight? Said, oh, no, we're at home just drinking a cup of coffee and talking. Oh, okay. So they hung up, and the husband said, well, why don't we try that? She said, okay, you make the coffee, all right? She's making the coffee. They get their coffee, and they sit down, and they just look at each other. Finally, she says, call them and see what they're talking about. I mean, really, is it that bad? I've seen couples. They never talk. It's about liking each other. My favorite story is the older couple who made pickles together. He grew the cucumbers, she pickled them, and they gave pickles to everybody. I mean, the family knew they were known for the pickles. Finally, he passed away. And the family gathers around Mom, and they said, hey, Mom, we want you to know something. We're going to plant this spring. We're going to have the cucumbers. You don't have to worry. You're going to get to fulfill what you love doing, making pickles. She goes, no, I hated making pickles. I did it because your dad loved to grow cucumbers. One of the boys said, he told me he hated growing cucumbers. He did it because you love making pickles. Isn't that awesome? All these years they've been doing it. They didn't want to, but they did it because why? Together. So companionship, relationship means I'm cleaving, I'm holding on to, I'm enjoying her. Now, there's another part of relationship, and that's oneness. And the two become one flesh. We have always interpreted that as sex. When you become one flesh, sex. That's why a marriage, traditionally, you can annul a marriage if it was never consummated, meaning you never had sex, because the idea was you didn't come together as one, so therefore you're not truly one. I don't think that idea of oneness is just sex. I think intimacy is a lot bigger than sex. I think sex is a lot bigger than intercourse. Listen, sex is not just showing up naked. Sex is an event, an atmosphere that happens all day long. It's an atmosphere. I meet guys all the time, and they said, man, I married a nun. I said, really? I said, yeah, none in the morning, none in the afternoon, none at night. I'm like, dude, you got the whole thing wrong. That's not the point of marriage. And so here's what I tell them. I said, why don't you try doing this? Why don't you try folding clothes? Folding clothes? Yeah. You don't need to order a pill off the internet that's going to bring desire into your wife. Fold clothes. Wash the dishes. Get up off the couch and help her and watch what happens. And it never fails. It works. You know why? Because sex is so much more than the moment. It's about love. It's an atmosphere that says, I'm giving myself to you. I believe it's the way God intended it. I believe oneness is about being intimate at every level. In fact, I think God created us with a desire. Your desire, when you see a beautiful woman, beautiful, wonderful man, whatever you call guys, and I'm trying not to use the word hot, but anyway, if you see somebody and you kind of, wow, let me tell you where that desire came from. That's God-given, okay? When Adam was given, I just believe when he woke up from his nap, and God says, I got something for you. Come out, Eve. And Eve walks out. Remember, she doesn't have anything on. She walks out, and he goes, hapam. That is, at last. That is a Hebrew word that means, oh my goodness. Okay? Hapam, not hapam, it's hapam. It's a great word. I believe there are sexual overtones to that word that Adam said, at last. Because he knew he had a desire, but he wasn't sure how to fulfill it. Paul uses the same word desire, except he uses the Greek word pathos, which is passion. That's where we get psychopath, sociopath, all of that. Pathos is desire or passion. Now, here's the way the Bible works with your passion. God gave you the gift of sex. He gave you the gift of desire, okay? But he also gave you a fireplace where the fire goes. Now, in Florida, those of you who have a fireplace, you use it 2 nights a year, okay? Or if you're like me, you turn the air conditioner down, and then you light the fire, or you get a fire. A fireplace can be one of the coolest things. It's wonderful. Actually, we love it. We've always had a fireplace and always cut wood, and now we're just gas logs. Flip a switch. That's a lot easier. I love what a fire does. As it's in the fireplace, it warms the place, makes it romantic. Really, really cool. What's the difference in that fire and the fire that burns your house down? There's only one difference. Control. Control. God built a fireplace for your fire. It's called marriage. Once the fire leaves the fireplace, it will destroy everything it touches. You follow me? So this desire that God gave you to mate, that's great. If He gave you that desire, it's a good desire. There is nothing wrong with that desire. But there's everything wrong with letting the fire get out of the fireplace and mating with everything that you see. That's not what God intended. He didn't create us like an animal. He created us like Himself. And so oneness involves meeting that need within the fireplace that God has created in a covenant relationship. I like the way Tim Keller says it. Tim Keller says, sex is perhaps the most powerful God-created way to help give your entire self to another human being. Sex is God's appointed way for two people to reciprocally say to one another, I belong completely, permanently, and exclusively to you. And the quote that I shared last week that I couldn't remember the whole thing, your naked body deserves the honor of being shared with only someone who has covenanted to never stop loving your naked soul. I believe that sex is God's gift. Now let me tell you what the world has done. The world has taken it away from us. Like it has a lot of things. Like it has the arts, like it has dance, like it has a lot of things. It's taken it away, and I find Christians who really still think they feel guilty when they have sex. They feel guilty. They just do not feel clean. They don't feel there's something wrong. Let me tell you what the early church fathers. Now, these guys are in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries. Tertullian and Ambrose preferred the extinction of the human race to its propagation through sex. In other words, they said, we'd rather the human race end than to have sex. Origen was one that is one of the confirming early church fathers to the Bible that we hold today, the 66 books that we know today. Before he was ordained, he never married. Before he was ordained, he couldn't figure out what to do with the desire God had given him when he saw a woman, so he had himself castrated. That's what I said, castrated. Before he got ordained. Really? You think that's going to help? St. Augustine is the church father whose theology is a lot of what we believe today. In fact, the Catholic Church is so Augustinian, St. Augustine becomes a foundation piece for the doctrines of the church. Listen to what he said. Sex is permissible within marriage, but you're not supposed to enjoy it because then it's a sin. So when you have early church fathers who believe that, and you kind of walk through, and let me tell you why they believed it. Because they believed that pleasure was wrong, the material was wrong. We have people in this world believe the same thing. What I think it's time to do is reclaim the gift that God has given us. We ought to celebrate the fire that's in the fireplace, and you ought to keep it burning. And as a couple, you would be shocked how many questions came in, and let me just be real honest, about oral sex within marriage. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, some 20-year-old asked it. No, they were 60. Oral sex in marriage. I feel guilty in our marriage, or we're not on the same page sexually. Well, let me tell you what. Here's what's wonderful. God has given His precious gift. And you got to hold on to that sword, and you got to fight for your marriage because the devil wants to bring stuff in your relationship like pornography, like an affair. Did you know that 68% of divorces start with somebody meeting somebody on the internet? 68%. So what's happening is the desire's there and we can't meet it within the fireplace, so I'm going outside the fireplace. Did you know half of marriages end because of pornography? It's rampant. It's everywhere. Do you know what the average age of a kid when they first see a pornographic image? 7 years old. Maybe even earlier. That's dated a couple of years. So what I'm saying to you is that cell phone you're carrying around could be your mistress. And it can bleed all your love and affection away from the one that you were intended to give it to. It takes you out of the fireplace and it burns the rest of the house down. So instead of trying to meet the need other ways or reject the need, let's meet the need appropriately within what is called marriage. And God has given a wonderful thing You're to be one. And that oneness is not all about sex, but it does involve sex. You say, but Pastor, things have changed. We're older now. It's not the same. No, it's not the same. But sex is so rich. Sex is so much more than an act. And so you have to change. You have to change as you grow older. I mean, as you grow older, what doesn't hurt doesn't work. And it's just the way that our bodies are. So does that mean we miss out on the things that God has purposed for us? Absolutely not. Does this surprise God that we're growing old? No. The gift that he gave us wasn't just for our 20s and 30s. It's for the whole journey. We're to be one. We're to come together in the most intimate way, and we're to share everything. I personally believe, guys, that she ought to be able to pick up your cell phone at any time and scroll through every text, every email, everything that's on that cell phone. If I'm one with her, why would I not want that? I'm one with her. And I want every way that to happen so that we can walk together as one. It's all about relationship. That's the first, I believe, and most important purpose of your marriage. Secondly is image bearer. I think you were created and we were created to bear God's image. And so look at chapter 1, verse 28 of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 28. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over every living thing that moves on the earth. Now, I want you to notice something. He says, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion. All of those verbs you may think has to do with having babies. It's not just about having babies. The word multiply is the word to have strength. The word dominion and subdue, let me show you this. The word subdue is the word for when you're teaching your pet no, like if they're chewing or whatever they're doing, no, that's subduing. You and I are responsible to subdue this earth, meaning what's best for it. We are the ones representing God to subdue. Now, dominion, when you hear the word dominion, do you not hear the word king? That's what the word dominion means. It means we represent the owner. We represent the king. And I believe that one of the reasons God gave us marriage is so that together we could bring glory to his name. And if you read verse 28 in light of that, what does it mean to fill the earth? Does that mean to fill the earth with babies? Could be, but I think it also means to fill the earth with his glory. In other words, as a husband and wife, we are a beautiful picture of what God intends to have with his bride. You are an image bearer. Rachel used to love to do counted cross stitch, and I don't remember if it was the first, I don't think it was the first one, but one of the gifts she gave me, one of the ones she did, I still have to this day, it was Psalm 34. It basically says, oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. And the reason I love that gift that she made with her own hands, it was like her inviting me, hey, David, let's spend the rest of our life exalting him and glorifying him through our marriage. I think that's awesome. And I want to tell you, as a married couple, you get the greatest chance to give him glory and honor and show the world what our God is like, because you represent the King. And so I think image bearing is a purpose of marriage. And the last one is procreation. Procreation. Were Adam and Eve to have babies? Absolutely. Were they to have children? Yes. Should we? Maybe. And I'll explain that. It's very interesting to me that Adam and Eve were told to multiply. And I think that you have to keep in mind they were the first. Obviously, they're the first of the human race. If they don't reproduce, there is no human race. So this command was given very specifically to them. And I think it was a command that they needed to obey, and they did obey. However, it's interesting, that command is never repeated about marriage in the New Testament. And what do you say? What are you saying? Here's what I'm saying. I don't believe it is a command that just because you're married, you're supposed to have children, and if you don't, you're disobeying God. I don't see it in the New Testament. I think it was very much a part of God's plan. I think it is a gift from God. I think children are an inheritance, and when God blesses you, you ought to rejoice and honor them as such. We have families in this church that have many children. And by the way, remember, it's not just through having babies, it's through adopting and foster parenting babies. It's basically saying, I'll do everything I can to provide a home and to provide the love that God intended for these precious children to have. But we have couples in our church that have a bunch of babies, not 19 plus, but we've got a lot. And then we have couples in our church that are as godly as I know, they don't have any children. And I ask them, why not? And they said, we just don't believe God has led us that way. That's awesome. I just believe you ought to follow what God tells you. And whatever you do, you ought to do it for Him. Not because you want to make more money. Not because you're selfish and you want to spend all your time on other things. If you have children, they're going to get in the way. If that's your reasoning, you're disobeying God. But if God has truly spoken and said, no, I've got plans for you, and it's going to be better that you not, then don't. Now, here's what's interesting. Isn't it interesting we can't procreate without the other? Y'all with me? You can't procreate with it. A female cannot just have an offspring. The male cannot just have an offspring. Do you think that's accidental? That's by design. So what I will say is procreation is not the only purpose for marriage, but marriage is the only place for procreation. The reason God built it that way is because where do kids learn how to live? Where do they learn how to be a mama, a daddy, a husband, a wife? By a family. By watching their mom, by watching their dad. That's where I learned. That's where most of you learned. And the reason we got to get this marriage foundation back, and the reason we got to do everything to get it right, is because we got a generation coming behind us, and they're watching us. And they got a generation behind them, and we are going to build flawed foundations and buildings if we don't get it right in our generation. So God intended for a little boy and a little girl to have a mom and daddy to show them how to live and how to be married in the way they're supposed to be. There are a lot of single moms and dads in this room. I cannot tell you how much I commend you. You didn't choose that. You know, in fact, if you ask any single mom or any single dad, is this the way it should be? The first thing they'll say is absolutely not, because it's the toughest thing you'll ever do. Am I right, single moms? It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But my applause is for you in trying to provide for them what you know God intended for them to have. But I cannot, because of God's design, I cannot, because of God's word, bring myself to believe that the best environment for a little boy and a little girl is two moms or two dads. God had a plan, and it works great. Now, let's say a couple shows up and they've got their children with them. Let's say two women show up and they've got children, or two men show up. What are we going to do? We're going to love the fire out of them. We're going to do everything we can to show them the love of Christ. We're going to wrap them up. It's a choice they made. And guess what? We are ministers of reconciliation, so we're going to do everything we can to bridge the love of God to a little boy, little girl, or two moms or two dads, to help them see that God's got a plan for them and a purpose. So I just believe that procreation, while it's not the only purpose, is one of the purposes that God gave to Adam and Eve. And it's a beautiful thing. So with all of this said, with all these purposes, my question to you is, what happened? We have families that are busting up. We got marriages that are falling. What happened? Because it sounds like a reasonable plan. We got a chain, a sprocket. We got everything that works. We got desire. We got a place to fulfill the desire. It's like everything's perfect. Well, I'll tell you what happened. Chapter 3 happened. Genesis chapter 3 happened. They ate some fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They pretended to be God. They wanted to be God. They kicked God off the throne, put themselves on the throne. And let me show you the result. It's verse 16. Chapter 3, verse 16. As a part of the curse, he says to the woman, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In your pain, you will bring forth children. Now, we're not going to, that's a part of the curse, ladies, and you just need to scream Adam and Eve. You don't have to curse God, curse Adam and Eve in your moment of pain. It's the next phrase that is absolutely the key that a lot of people never realize. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Now that sounds good. Well, my goodness, what's wrong with the woman having desire for her husband? And got a little problem with the husband ruling, but the first part sounds good. Look at something. If you have an ESV, there's a footnote by the preposition for. Okay, go down to the footnote. The footnote in the ESV says, or against. Whoa. I mean, that's like diametrically opposed. My options are you're going to have desire for your husband, or you're going to have desire against your husband. I personally believe, and we have a lot of support for the words here, it's the woman will have desire against her husband. And the man will want to rule over her. This is not prescriptive saying this is what marriage ought to be. This is descriptive saying since the fall, this is what it's going to look like. And it's a mess. The word for desire for the woman shall be against your husband. That word desire literally means she wants to dominate. She wants to be in charge. She wants to dominate. The word for rule, mashal, is a word, means the same thing. It means a dictator. It means someone who is a king, and they have subjects bowing down to him. So guess what? As a result of the fall, what got introduced into marriage? Selfishness. To love and to cherish turned into to dictate and dominate. And there's not a one of us in this room that has escaped the scar of the fall. Every one of us are selfish creatures. We are. I mean, let's own it. Let's be honest about it. We're broken. And what self just gets in the way of marriage. I think it's the natural. You know how in creation and in the animal world, everything has a natural enemy. I think the natural enemy of your marriage is selfishness. Hey, I don't want to help Rachel around the house. I'm tired. I don't want to. When I come home from work, I've talked all day. Last thing I want to do is sit down and talk. Think about all the ways you're selfish. I don't want to go to the mall with you and stand there and look at dresses. You pick whatever you want, just do it. Now, why do we say that, guys? It's not because we got any legit reason. It's one, we're selfish. And we don't want to do something that pleases her, honors her, helps her. I wish I could stand here and tell y'all I've never battled with that. Oh my goodness, I'm eating up with it. And so are you. And 50-50 doesn't change it. Oh, I know what let's do. Let's just get our roles figured out. I had a couple tell me one time, we got it all worked out. She does everything inside the house. I do everything outside. I said, really? And that works? Yeah. Well, okay, what about the garbage? Because it starts inside the house, but it's got to end up on the outside of the house. And they looked at one another and said, yeah, some weeks we don't put the garbage out because I think she's supposed to do it and he thinks I'm supposed to do it. There you go. You know what the problem is with 50-50? It never works because you always argue over what is 50-50. And why do you argue? Because we're selfish. We're selfish. Now, the problem's not marriage. Did you know there are more, percentage-wise, there are more people wanting to get married today than ever, percentage-wise? So then why is marriage on the decline, as we always hear? Hey, there's nothing wrong with marriage. God had a great idea. We're the problem. If we're ever going to fix marriage, let me tell you where it starts. With us. We got a messed up heart. We got a heart that says, please me, make me feel good, bring me pleasure. I think rape happens in marriage all the time. I think men and sometimes women force themselves on one another, not to seek the other's interest or pleasure, but to bring pleasure to themselves. I think we do the most ungodly things in our marriage, all because we're supposed to be legally married. We can do whatever we want. If your goal is to please her and his goal is to please you, ladies, it'll work. But if there's any bit of self involved, it destroys everything it touches. And do you know what the only cure for that is? Nagging. Am I right? Doesn't nagging work? No, it doesn't work. Where did we think that if I just nag them enough, it's going to change them? No. How many of you, don't raise your hand. Please don't. But how many of you married thinking you were going to change the other one? You go into it saying, oh, I can change him. Man, I'm going to marry him. I'm going to change. Let me tell you, the problems you saw before that you thought you could change, marriage magnified them. They get bigger. You see, the answer is not you trying to change your spouse. It's not you nagging your spouse. What's the answer to make marriage work the way God intended it? There's only one: the gospel. It's when Jesus Christ walks in our life and changes us. In fact, the greatest marriage verse I know is, I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but it's Christ who lives in me. And this life I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who gave himself for me. That's Galatians 2:20. It's the greatest marriage verse I know, because the more I crucify me, the greater our marriage. And I'll show you a graphic, and I hope you can remember this. If this stand is Jesus, for every step I take away from Jesus and dying to self to live for him, every step I take away, I step away from Rachel. I used to think I could avoid it. I used to think, no, I don't have to really walk real close to the Lord, and I can still love her. No. It'll show up every time. Because the foundation of every relationship is our relationship to Jesus. And when that's not there, there's going to be cracks. So here's the good news. He has reconciled us to himself so we can have great marriages. And next time I want to talk to you about the sanctifying work of marriage. I believe the reason marriage gets better the longer you're married is because you get better. Because God is changing you from the inside. But it all starts with brokenness. So I got a suggestion for us. Why don't we bring my mess to Rachel's mess and together say, God, here it is. If we're broken, let's be broken together. If we're broken, let's be broken together. Hey, let's fight for this. Let's hang on to this. Let's not play the game of, well, it's your fault because you did this, or it's your fault you did that. Hey, it's both of our faults. We're broken people. Let's be broken together. I did a wedding for a couple that they were special needs. And they were really, really struggling. I mean, they social issues, a lot of things. And I'm doing their wedding, and I'm thinking, God, should I even be doing this? They don't know what they're doing. I'm reading the vows to them, and they're saying the vows, and I'm like, they don't understand what they're saying. They don't understand what they're doing. They've got issues. And I promise you, I felt God lean out of the heavens and go, so do you. So do you. And in that moment, I realized something. I'm just like them. I'm broken. I'm selfish. And so is Rachel. But we just decided to give it all to him and see if he could make something beautiful. And guess what? He did. And I'm going to hang on to her and to our marriage. And I'm going to fight for it. Because I'm going to be broken together. Broken together. So if we could imagine this morning the Spirit of God, the Spirit hovering. In Genesis 1:1, it says that the Spirit of God brooded over the waters. There was chaos. He brooded. He hovered over it. And then all of a sudden, out of that chaos, he creates what we now know as planet Earth. What an amazing God we have to take the chaos and bring something beautiful. That's exactly what he can do in your marriage.